I think I have to tell you that this kind of violence is unacceptable. But I also don't think I need to tell you that this kind of violence is not a coincidence. When sanctuary politicians, activists, and the media work hard to create chaos and fear instead of using their platforms to reassure their communities, this is the result.
With more, let's bring in CTV News U.S. political analyst Eric Ham. Eric, hello to you. So let's start with what is happening in Minneapolis. Anti-ICE protests are intensifying. The governor is calling for the removal of ICE agents. What are you watching for to happen next? Will these calls for border agents to leave be heard by the Trump government?
It's not clear if the Trump administration is going to hear and heed these calls by local and state officials to leave. But we also know that Minnesota is home to 100 of the Fortune 500 companies, and 60 CEOs of those companies have actually now written a public letter calling for de-escalation. And so now we see that the business community that the Trump administration oftentimes courts is now weighing in, placing their finger on the scale of this, calling for de-escalation, not necessarily for ICE to leave, but they do want to see calm, particularly on the streets of Minneapolis. In addition to that, we know that both the governor as well as the attorney general, Keith Ellison, a former member of Congress, they are actually calling for the courts not only to intervene, but they're asking for an emergency adjudication to actually force ICE to stop with their Operation Metro Surge in Minneapolis and leave immediately.
So this is just one major domestic issue on President Trump's plate, yet he continues to take aim at Canada over the weekend and threatening a 100% tariff if Canada has a free trade agreement with China, which is not on the table. Our Prime Minister has made that very clear. Where do you think he's going with this? Why do you think he is back at his attacks on Canada and calling Mark Carney the governor of Canada?
Well, I think there's two things at play here. Clearly, President Donald Trump doesn't understand exactly what is in the Kuzma agreement. In fact, Canada, because the agreement explicitly states that it has a non-compete clause with a nation like China and is unable to actually do a free trade agreement. And so that is in there, and the president certainly does not know that. But of course, we know members of the administration likely do. However, what we're seeing from the president, I think, for the first time, is now Carney is in for the Trudeau treatment. I think even though the president has continuously disrespected Canada and simply does not see Canada as a peer nation of the United States, we do know that, however, the president does, or at least until now, has seen Mark Carney as an actual equal. We know that there has been tremendous respect and admiration and adoration for Mark Carney by President Donald Trump. However, that all changed, I think, with this agreement between Canada and China, particularly on electric vehicles. And more importantly, Prime Minister Carney's address in Davos this week also, I think, was a signal to the president that right now Carney is not only taking more of the oxygen in the room from the president, but he's also laid down a marker that Canada and, of course, other middle nations need to resist and now begin the process of moving on from the United States. And I think clearly both the president as well as many within his own administration are now looking at Carney and Canada as a threat. And now we're seeing the gloves are off with the president.
CTV News U.S. political analyst Eric Ham. Eric, thank you so much for that. Stay warm.